Alrighty. This will be the 6th time trying to record this chapter. Let's just get into it and see what happens. We are back with Dissident by Lisa Beeson, Book 4 in the Transcendence series, and this is Chapter 4 in Dissident. 9:41 p.m. Alvaro jolted awake. That voice. Ari's voice. He quickly sat up on the couch, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. It felt as if he had just sat down, but he must have fallen asleep while he was trying to catch up on the news. It was now playing the tail end of a PSA about being sure to wash your hands and stay away from large groups to help protect against transmitting the Red Death virus. The news must have cycled all the way through, because the same story he had been watching before was beginning again. It was about the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of the Louisiana senator, who was in that strange vision Ari had invoked at the end of his Red Death premonition, and 30 or so others who had died at a sketchy private club in the middle of a swamp. The authorities were still unsure about the cause of the sudden deaths. They had ruled out the virus since none of the bodies were infected. Right now, the running theories were either a gas leak or a bad reaction to the strange new drug they had found all over the place. It had the same emblem of the Mad Hatter that he had seen in his vision. The same strange drug that had messed Val up so much that she left Scion's Keep to get more. Alvaro knew that it all had something to do with Ari, Adam, and Jean-Baptiste, but he just couldn't figure out how. The adults were being tight-lipped about the whole thing. 2 bright beams pierced through the gauzy curtains in the farmhouse living room. He looked towards the windows. And all the farm equipment are going through. We're about to have more rain, so they're trying to get their work done. Oy. 2 bright beams pierced through the gauzy curtains in the farmhouse living room. He looked towards the windows and noticed Noah's big silhouette already out on the front porch. No one could get past the Paradise Glade security grid without him allowing it, especially with all the modifications Joshua, Miles, and Cale had put into it. It had to be Ruby St. Clair arriving. She had been expected earlier, but he figured that there must have been some traffic or something. An ardent conversation between Hugo, Cass, Jamie, Lynette, and Joshua seemed to be traveling from the kitchen, where everyone had congregated after a long day's work, towards the living room. Alvaro tried to get Hugo's attention to tell him he had heard Ari's voice, but the man didn't hear him in the commotion of everyone going out to see the newcomer. "It's all right, Al," his dad assured him as he followed slowly behind the rest of the group. There was an almost empty beer bottle in his hand. "Come on out and say hello." But I... Alvaro sputtered as his dad walked out the front door. It was no use. Nobody was listening to him, per usual. Grabbing the new pocket-sized sketchbook Jamie had given him, he quickly wrote down what he had heard Ari's voice say, then dated it and put it 1 tally mark. Once that was done, he stood up and went out to the now brightly lit front porch. He was just in time to see a woman get out of a tan Corolla, and Cass run down the steps to greet her with a tight hug. "Welcome, sister," Cass said before they even drew apart. Ruby St. Clair was shorter and looked older than Cass, but they had the same bright smile. It was a long roundabout journey, but I don't believe we were followed, Ruby said with the same southern accent as Cass, which I have not been doing, and I'm not going to start now. It's a little late in the series. Wait a minute. We? A guy and a girl about college age slowly got out of the car, as if they were unsure of the situation. White surgical masks covered half of their faces, the kind that had been so popular in Japan for decades. Americans had started wearing them ever since the rapid spread of the Red Death virus. Vendors were making a pretty penny selling cheap masks, touting their superior ability to protect wearers from the virus, when in reality they did little to no good. Alvaro's dad had said that in times of crisis, people tend to forgo logic in favor of pretty lies to ease anxiety. Ruby turned back towards the car. "Y'all can take those off now. We're safe here." They shared an uneasy look before reluctantly pulling off their masks. Hector and Sadie? Alvaro recognized them from past visions of Ari, back when she was still Kira. What are they doing here? They're supposed to think that Ari is dead. A golden retriever jumped out of the same door as Sadie and sat obediently next to her. Smelling the air, it let its tongue flop out of its mouth with a lopsided grin, while its tail beat happily against the ground. Alvaro looked to his dad and the other adults. They were curious, but didn't seem surprised by the extra arrivals. Not even Noah's mom, Lynette, who'd only just gotten there a couple days earlier. Or Joshua, who was only a couple years older than he was. What the heck? Nobody ever tells me anything. Once Cass and Ruby stepped apart, Jamie eagerly pushed her way past Hugo and Noah and practically jumped down the steps towards the sisters. She grabbed Ruby's hands while a myriad of emotions ran across her face. Cass said that you actually saw them? You saw my brother and Jean-Baptiste and... She nervously glanced over at Hector and Sadie still by the car. And Ari? Was it as awful as I... She couldn't bring herself to ask the question fully. Alvaro was glad he hadn't had the obviously distressing vision she was referring to. He knew that they'd been using the remnants of a sculpture Jamie said she couldn't fight the impulse to make. But didn't want to keep, for projects around the property. It had looked as though she had taken a sledgehammer to it, and with what he had learned of Jamie, that was most likely what had happened. Instead of shrinking back from the tall woman's impassioned non-greeting, Ruby looked at her with understanding. I saw them, she said, nodding. The memory of it seemed to etch pain and sorrow across her face. And yes, it was horrible. But you must understand that even possessed by all that darkness, even with all that power at her disposal, she still asked for my guidance. She practically pleaded for it. The girl we know and love was still in there. Adam and Jean-Baptiste went into this having full trust in her. They believed that she could save them, and so do I. Jamie nodded as tears leaked from her eyes. I mean, Adam's been in dangerous situations before, but it's never felt like this. I've never seen anything like what I saw. She took a deep breath. He's the only family I have left. I can't lose him. They will come back to us, Ruby assured her with a squeeze of her hands. Hector and Sadie seemed uneasy, looking to each other over the top of the car and having a silent conversation using only shrugs and exaggerated facial expressions. Alvaro was shocked to hear the sound of another car and see headlights beams coming down the long driveway towards them. He looked to everyone else, and again, no one seemed surprised. Seriously? He thought with an exaggerated flap of his arms. It was a last-minute thing. His dad leaned over and whispered to him, noticing his displeasure at being left out of the loop. Cass didn't tell us about it until about an hour ago or so. You were sleeping. The yeasty smell of beer on his breath brought Alvaro back to the days after his mother had died. Finding out that Marin was loyal to the Reinholds and Anaxmander had hit his dad hard. It wasn't as bad as it had been before coming to Scion's Keep. Cass and the rest made sure he didn't go over 2 beers on a bad day, but it still worried Alvaro a bit. I will not be doing this a 7th time, I swear. Chill out. As the vehicle came closer, Alvaro saw that it was a van with temporary plates. Once it pulled up next to Ruby's car and stopped, Hector jogged over and opened up the back. An older couple got out of the front, looking just as uneasy and shell-shocked as the other two had been. Ruby told them to take off their masks as well. Phil and Tess? They looked so much older than they had in the last vision Alvaro had of them. I guess believing that your child was murdered will do that to you. Hector came from the back pushing a wheelchair, and he and a girl in her late 20s helped a redhead guy out of his seat and into it. Phil told them that it was okay to take off their masks. Jack? Ruby beckoned them all closer. Everyone, Cass said to those on the porch, I'd like to introduce y'all to Phil and Tess Riley and their children. She gestured to each in turn. Hector, Sadie, and Jack. Cass then gestured to the other girl from the van, who was now standing behind Jack's wheelchair and putting her hands on his shoulders. And this is Jack's fiancée, Stacy Tran. Jack put his hands on hers and squeezed. They all had nodded or waved as Cass introduced them, but Alvaro could tell they were wondering how she seemed to already know them so well. He didn't know how much Ruby told them yet, but they were probably still getting used to the idea that seers and oracles were a real thing, let alone everything else on top of that. Alvaro had first thought that Stacy had been comforting Jack, but as he looked closer, he saw that it was actually her gleaning comfort from him. There was a sadness in her eyes, a sadness he remembered well. She had just lost someone. Maybe her family wasn't so lucky in avoiding the virus. Maybe that was why she was here instead of with them. It wasn't as if she and Jack were married yet. Welcome to Paradise Glades, Noah said, taking over the role of host since it apparently hadn't occurred to Jamie to do so. He walked over to shake Phil and Tessa's hands, while deftly guiding Jamie over with him. We're glad that you're here. There's obviously much to talk about. I heard her, Alvaro said, feeling a sudden and inexplicable need to speak up, surprising even himself. Everyone turned to him. Now that he finally had everyone's attention, Alvaro wanted to shrink and run away from it, but he could feel that it was important to let them all know. I heard Ari's voice just a moment ago on the couch. He gestured over his shoulder with his thumbs towards the living room windows for clarification. He instantly realized that it was an unnecessary gesture and felt hopelessly stupid. What did she say? Cass asked, urging him on and mercifully taking the focus away from his social awkwardness. He opened his sketchbook to the page where he had written it down, even though he already knew it by heart. Her voice sounded kind of far away and languid, I guess, but she said, "Have faith in my chosen." Cass and Ruby glanced at each other with knowing smiles. Cass turned back to him with that beautiful confidence he had come to appreciate in her. Then that is what we shall all do. 9:47 p.m. Ellie let out a gusty, dispirited sigh as she lounged on one of the rec room couches, going through the pictures on her tablet of all the places she would never get to go with a mournful wistfulness. Milan, Paris, London, Rome. It's not fair, she sulked. It was as if the world was conspiring to keep her from leaving Scion's Keep. The Red Death virus, the threat of Anaxmander's men, and especially her parents, they were all in league together, all trying to kill her dreams and stifle her artistic spirit. Angst and discontent were filling her chest like a caustic balloon. If the pressure wasn't released soon, she was going to explode. She sighed again. Ugh, enough already, Ellie, Claudia said from the other couch, looking up from one of her boring medical textbooks. I can't think over all that broody sighing. I get it. We all get it. You're mad that you can't go on some stupid fashion tour of Europe. There are more important things going on right now, if you haven't noticed. Ellie was shocked into silence at Claudia's snarky outburst. She tried not to take it too personally. Claudia had been in a salty mood ever since Cam broke up with her right before everything had gone completely insane. And Ellie knew that it wasn't very practical at the moment to travel through Europe to further her fashion education. She was aware that people were dying from the Red Death virus, and that it was all super serious. It was just that she was so tired of the restless wanderlust that had been consuming her the past month or so. She didn't know why her previously complacent attitude towards staying at Scion's Keep had suddenly changed. She only knew that she had to get out or she'd go crazy, especially now that she wasn't even allowed to work at the cafe anymore. She could understand why Val snuck away as much as she did. This place had become a prison, and she was constantly worried for Ari, Val, and Soren, wondering where they were and what was happening to them. But it wasn't as if she could do anything about all that. Her complete ineptitude to help her friends was beyond disheartening. "Thank you," Taika said from the side alcove where he was playing some stupid ultra-violent assassin game, which he was so not allowed to play. "I'm glad somebody other than me finally called her out for being so freaking annoying." "Shut up, Ty," Ellie shouted, sitting up to glare at him, focusing all her angst and frustration on her little brother. No one could push her buttons like he could. "I'm going to tell Mom and Dad that you're playing that." "Shut up, Ty," he mocked in a dopey, high-pitched voice. "I'm going to tell Mom and Dad because my name's Ellie, and I'm a gloomy derpface who only thinks about myself. Derpy derp der, Lesai." Ellie grabbed one of the pillows on the couch and launched it at him. Unfortunately, it missed, and he laughed at the pathetic attempt. Just as she was about to unleash a hellacious tirade on him, Claudia's skin cuff pinged with a message. After a brief glance at the message, Claudia quickly slammed her book shut and tossed it aside as she stood up to leave. "What's up?" Ellie asked, hoping for a bit of excitement. "Where are you going?" "Don't worry about it," Claudia said in a dismissive tone as she walked towards the doors. "Are you seriously mad at me or something?" Ellie asked. She absolutely hated the panicky feeling she got when she thought someone was angry with her. "Not everything is about you, Ellie. Grow the hell up," Claudia said before leaving the room with a purposeful stride. Ouch. Even though there was a 2.5-year age difference between the two of them, Claudia had never talked down to her like that before. Taika let out an incredulous low whistle. Ever since Cam dumped her, Claudia's become a real bit... "Ty!" Ellie shouted, cutting him off before he could finish the statement. Their parents hated curse words, and it had become a habit to correct him. "What? It's the truth," he said as his fingers furiously clicked the buttons of the game controller. "Yeah, well, keep your truth to yourself," she said, slumping down dejectedly into the couch. Even if it was the absolute truth, her brother needed to learn some tact and not say everything that came into his brain. She glanced at her cuff to see that there was still a little time before curfew, but not enough to really do anything. "God, it is so boring with everyone gone." Before she could let out another sigh, her cuff began emitting a high-pitched screech. Her whole body tensed at the sudden abrasive sound. Her cuff had never made that kind of noise before. Sitting back up, she realized that Taika's cuff was doing the same thing as hers. The border around the screen began blinking bright red, and a message appeared in bold black letters. "Scion's Keep is a lie. Gordon, Azza, Marin, and Claudia cannot be trusted. Anaxmander's men are coming. Take evasive action." Ellie barely registered Taika saying her name amidst the cacophonous noise. It felt as if her brain was malfunctioning. She couldn't move. She could barely breathe. Scion's Keep is a lie? Anaxmander's men are coming here? Now? "Ellie!" Taika screamed as loudly as he could, finally gaining her attention. "What?" she bellowed back. But then she saw that his eyes were wide with fear. He wasn't trying to be a brat. He was terrified and looking to her, his big sister, for guidance. "My little brother needs me." The thought quashed her own fear and confusion, and a protective fierceness took over, allowing her to move again. "Come on!" she shouted over the noise. "We need to find Mom and Dad!" He vaulted over the back of his chair towards her. Once he was close enough, she took off his cuff, then did the same with hers and tossed them both onto the couch. She couldn't stand hearing that incessant noise anymore. It was making it hard to think. Grabbing Taika's hand, she led him out of the rec room. Away from the sound, her thoughts began to clear. She figured her parents would be in their apartment by this time, so she headed towards the elevator. Taika clung to her hand tightly and stuck by her side, just as he used to do when he was little. He had been such a cute and cuddly little kid before he turned into an infuriating preteen. She missed little Taika. Halfway to the glass elevator, Taika jerked her down hard by the arm, put his hand over her mouth, and practically dragged her to the cover of some potted topiaries at the edge of the smaller inner courtyard. She was just about to question him when he let go of her hand and put his finger to his mouth to silently shush her. When she stopped trying to speak, he pointed up past the iron balustrade of the second level, where Marin was meeting up with Ozza and Claudia in front of Gordon's office. Gordon, Ozza, Marin, and Claudia can't be trusted. She had a hard time believing it, but it was best to be safe just in case. Ellie nodded to let Taika know that she understood, and he slowly took his hand away from her mouth. The alarm had abruptly cut off, and if they made a sound now, Marin would certainly hear them. "Who sent that message?" Marin demanded, her voice echoing in the cavernous atrium. "I assume it's the same terrorists that have the Gordon's boys," Ozza said. "They've somehow hacked into our security systems. All the cameras are down." "Terrorists? We're being attacked by terrorists too?" "Where's Gordon?" Marin asked. "He's on the roof with Skylar and Enzo. We were just about to join him. Have you taken care of Maya?" Ozza asked. "Not yet. I was just on my way." "What about the Tahanas?" "I was just about to talk with them when they saw the message, and I was forced to put them down, but the children weren't in the apartment." Ellie and Taika glanced at each other with frightened eyes, clutching their hands in an effort to stay silent. "Put them down? What is happening?" "They were in the rec room last I saw them," Claudia said with a cold detachment. Ellie couldn't believe how easily her best friend had just sold her out like that. What a freaking narc. "Don't bother with the children," Ozza said. "They will go wherever we take their parents. Maya, on the other hand, will be much more difficult to convince, and we don't have enough time. Our transports will be here any minute. She must be taken care of." Marin nodded, and they went their separate ways. Ozza and Claudia going up to the roof, and Marin going towards the lab where Maya worked stubbornly day and night. Even though Mara, the Ice Queen, had said that her people were already on to finding a cure for the Red Death virus, Maya evidently felt an urgent need to stay in the lab and keep working. As soon as Ellie and Taika were both completely sure Marin wouldn't hear them, they shot out from their hiding place and sprinted towards the stairs since they were closer. They only had to go up one flight to the second level anyway. Ellie refused to think of anything besides how much she hated running, or she knew that she would break down. She had to stay strong for Taika. They skidded to a halt outside their apartment door, both of them just standing there panting, trying to catch their breaths. Ellie couldn't move again, her muscles froze in trepidation. Once they opened that door, their lives could be changed forever. "Ellie?" Taika whispered, grabbing her hand and clasping it tight again. Had to cough. She glanced over at him and saw that he was thinking the same thing she was. Their parents' dead bodies might be on the other side of that door. "They're going to be fine," Ellie affirmed with a shaky nod. She couldn't allow herself to think otherwise. "Come on." She put her hand on the doorknob and forced herself to turn it. Slowly opening the door, she saw that the lights were on in the open space of their living room, but she didn't see her parents. "Mom? Dad?" she called out into the silence. There was no answer. Finding his courage, or unable to handle the tension any longer, Taika pushed past her into the apartment, wildly searching. He turned towards the kitchen and gasped. He started shaking and making a keening sound in the back of his throat. "Oh God, what?" Not wanting to look, but needing to, she stumbled forward into the apartment on tingling legs. Their parents were slumped over their kitchen table, Between them, a pool of dark red liquid was slowly dripping over the edge onto the floor. Just as she was about to scream, she noticed the overturned wine glasses and something weird sticking out of her dad's neck. Running over, she carefully plucked it out. It looked like some kind of small dart. She gently moved her mom's hair aside and noticed that there was a dart in her neck as well. Grabbing her mom and dad's wrist, she checked for their pulses. When she felt the steady cadence, she nearly cried with relief. Oh, thank God. The power cut out. Ellie's shriek rang through the darkness. This wasn't supposed to ever happen. Joshua had told her that Silence Keep was on its own power grid, with all kinds of backups, fail-safes, and technical jargon she didn't understand or care about. Once her eyes adjusted, milky beams of moonlight speared through the living room windows, and her heart rate calmed a bit. Focusing, she made a bright spark of light in her hands, then quickly went over to her terrified little brother. His eyes were staring straight ahead, unfocused. Oh crap, is he going into shock? Taika, she said, moving right in front of him. Taika, look at me. His eyes slowly focused on hers, but his chest was still hitching with quick, shallow breaths. Mom and Dad aren't dead. They are just sedated. And the red stuff is wine, not blood. It's just wine, okay? Not dead. Just wine, he puffed out between breaths. That's right. They're just sleeping. She made another spark and gave it to him to hold, then walked back over to the table and gently took the dart out of their mom's neck. She held it close to her spark so he could see it. They must have been having some wine when Marin shot them with the tranquilizer darts. The evil witch. Taika's breathing slowed, but then they heard and felt the rapid pulsating whoops of a helicopter. It sounded as though it was flying over the building. Then it was coming from almost right outside their apartment. Running over to the living room windows, they saw by the light of the full moon a huge black helicopter land on the far side of the large front lawn. The transport. That looks like a Chinook. I thought only the military had those, Taika said, somehow sounding both amazed and terrified at the same time. As soon as it touched down on the ground, the back end opened up and 6 men in Black Ops gear ran out holding guns. They were running straight for the building. That's Annex Mander's men! They're coming to get us! Taika squealed in terror. Ellie, what do we do? Ellie's whole body was tingling with a rush of panic. What do we do? What do we do? Okay? Ellie forced herself to breathe normally and get a hold of her nerves. Her family was counting on her. The message said to take evasive action. She grabbed Taika by the arm. You're the one that plays all those video games. How should we take evasive action? Video games. Oh, yeah. Okay, he said, gathering his thoughts. All right. First you need to get rid of the sparks, and I'll go lock the door. Ellie concentrated on dissipating the sparks of light that they had both winked out. And they both winked out. Taika ran over and turned the deadbolt on the apartment door, then turned back towards the apartment, thinking. He pointed to the leather couch in the living room. Help me move that in front of the door. They both ran over to the couch and used their combined strength to shove the heavy piece of furniture towards the door. Grunting and panting the entire way, they finally made it. Once Taika was satisfied that it blocked the door sufficiently, he went back towards the table where their parents were still slumped over, unconscious. We need to hide them, he instructed. Right. We can, put them in my room, Ellie said as she went over and grabbed their mother under her arms. Get her legs, Ty, hurry! Taika grabbed their mother under the knees and quickly hobbled their way across the apartment and carried her into Ellie's room. Let's put her on the other side of your bed, out of sight, Taika suggested. Ellie nodded, then started maneuvering around her bed. Good thing she's so tiny. I don't know how we're going to do this with Dad. He's enormous. I wish I got Mom's super strength instead of my wimpy ability, Taika lamented. Me too, Ellie said. Even with all the adrenaline, this was the most exercise she'd had in a while, and she was almost spent. They put their mother down and placed a bunch of Ellie's throw pillows on top of her. That'll have to do, Ellie said with a shrug. Come on, let's get Dad. Taika gave a quick nod, then swiped Ellie's down comforter from off her bed. What are you doing? We can get Dad onto the blanket and try to drag him that way. Kind of like how they move people in hospitals, Taika answered as he ran back towards the table, trailing her clean white comforter across the floor. What kind of messed up hospitals are you thinking of? Ellie asked, not bothering to hide her skepticism. But she didn't have any better ideas. But it's worth a try, I guess. As she stepped out of her room, the handle on the apartment door jiggled. A couple seconds later, it exploded in a small blast. Ellie reflexively cringed and cowered in terror on the ground, unable to do anything else. They were too late. Anaxmander's men had found them. Someone tried to open the door, but the couch prevented it. "Open the door!" a man's voice commanded. "Ellie!" Taika whispered from under the table, beckoning her to come and hide under it with him. Just as she was about to move, the man began violently bashing his shoulder against the door, moving the substantial couch a couple inches at a time. "Ellie, come on!" Taika squealed, frightened about her vulnerable position. Ellie began crawling towards the table, but before she was a little more than halfway there, the man managed to open the door wide enough to get through. He had a flashlight clipped to his chest that nearly blinded her. "No more nonsense," he growled, as if he wasn't mad before. If he wasn't mad before, he was definitely pissed off now. "Come with us now, or we'll be forced to use drastic measures." He stepped forward and pointed a strange-looking handgun at Ellie in warning. "Get up!" As Ellie stood, Taika burst from under the table with a howl of rage, running straight at the man. Ellie managed to grab him before he ran head-on into the gun now pointing right at him. Taika struggled for a moment, but they both froze when the man disappeared with a rush of air. Ellie and Taika glanced incredulously at each other, then back where the man had been. "What the—" Taika began, but stopped short when suddenly there was a different man standing in the doorway. He had an unconscious body flung over his massive shoulder like a sack of flour. Ellie protectively clutched her little brother closer. It was the only thing her body allowed her to do. Her feet refused to move. It felt as though her brain was malfunctioning again. The only information able to make it through her fear and confusion was that the new man was incredibly tall, built like a bodybuilder, and intimidating as all get out. Then Ellie recognized the lab coat and the slip-on shoes on the unconscious body. "Maya?" He opened the door easily, causing the couch to scoot across the floor as if it were made of cardboard. He scanned the apartment from the kitchen to Ellie's room as if following something they couldn't see. "Inside targets are dispatched, and the assets are secured," he said in a deep voice with a strange British accent. New Zealand? South African, maybe? Then it struck her what he'd actually said. Targets dispatched. Assets secured. Oh God, is he one of the terrorists? Are they good or bad? Before she could wrap her mind around what was happening, the man charged at them in an instant before the world whipped around an impossible blur, and there was a bright concussive blast. Ellie had no idea what was going on and didn't even realize that she was screaming until the man stood up and stepped away. She forced herself to stop, and it became eerily quiet. Her head was spinning, and her stomach felt queasy. Once she got her bearings, she looked around and saw that she, Taika, and Maya's unconscious body were on the ground against the back of the leather couch. None of them were harmed, but there was glass and debris all around them. "What the hell was that?" Taika shouted, as though he couldn't tell how loud he was being. Ellie hoped that the blast or her screaming hadn't permanently damaged his hearing. "One of my men destroyed the Chinook outside," the man answered tersely. "They just blew up Anaxmander's helicopter?" "What?" Taika said, wiggling his finger in his ear and opening his jaw wide, trying to get his ears to pop. Ellie noticed tiny bits of glass shards in the man's hair and on his shoulders, and she realized that he hadn't been attacking them. He had just shielded them with his own body behind the formidable heft of their leather couch, from the shock waves and flying glass caused by a massive explosion. She moved him over to the good guy column in her mind. Now that she wasn't afraid that he was going to attack them, she was able to see by the light of the full moon that he was actually quite gorgeous, in a badass beefcake sort of way. He looked as if Batman and Thor had somehow combined to make one ridiculously hot, bearded, broody, godlike person. His massive muscles rippled under his shirt in the most alluring way when he moved. "Can I keep you?" Once her mind caught up with her hormones, she gasped in panic. Mom and Dad! She turned to the table and saw that her comforter was covering most of her dad. There were a few minor cuts on his arms, but he'd been protected from the worst of the blast by distance and the puffiness of her down comforter. Taika must have tossed it over him before he had crawled under the table earlier. Ellie almost laughed at the futility of trying to hide their dad's big hulk under a blanket. But Taika's panicked reaction may have just saved his life. With her dad safe, Ellie ran to her room to check on their mom. The room's windows were cracked, but since they weren't facing the front lawn, they hadn't broken, and her mom had been protected from the brunt of the blast. Catching on to what she was doing, Taika ran to Ellie's doorway, looking at her in alarm. "Mom's okay," she assured him. The power came back on with the beeps and clicks of all their electronics and appliances turning on, and the kitchen and the living room were bathed in light once more. Taika turned back towards the big man who was checking on their dad. "What's going on? Who are you?" "You can call me Kale," he said as he continued to check their dad for injuries besides the cuts on his arms. My men and I are here to extract and relocate you to a safe location." "Where's that?" Ellie asked, unable to keep the nervous tremors out of her voice. He turned to look at them in the doorway, assessing them in a cold, clinical way. "There's no time to explain. I need you two to get the hospital beds from the infirmary. Can you do that?" Ellie and Taika looked to each other, then back towards Kale and nodded. The task gave them something to do besides panic. "Then go! Now!" he ordered. "As fast as you can!" Ellie and Taika ran out of the apartment, racing each other to the infirmary. It's not the end of the chapter, but it is a really long chapter, so... Yeah, we're going to pause it here, 37 minutes. Pause it here. We're going to have to do a part 1, part 2 of chapter 4. So this is the end of part 1 of chapter 4. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to get right into doing the next one if I have enough memory to do so. Peace.